Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but I think it is still fair to say that this brewery are best known for their big cakey Imperial stouts. We can probably call them pastry stouts in the modern context, and these guys are one of the real pioneers when it came to this sub-style. But like I said, in recent times they've been diversifying quite a lot. They've been doing lots of different styles and they do some really good beers, I'll have to say. But the one that we're going to have a look at today is a sub-style that I think I've only had from them 2 or 3 times before, but it's also a sub-style that I very much enjoy, and it's one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden too. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Stockholm once again, the Swedish capital. We're going to go to the northwest of the city to Sundbyberg, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Omnipollo. So this particular beer is called Samantha. It comes in at 12.5% ABV. This one is a bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stout with coffee beans added to it. So we probably can call this one an Imperial Coffee Stout in that case. But yeah, normally they'll add the coffee beans to the beer a lot earlier than they've done in this one. But we know Omnipollo are very good when it comes to adding adjuncts and things into beers, and particularly when it comes to the darker side of things too. So yeah, this should be pretty good. But this beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden in very early March of 2023. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what this beer is all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Omnipollo in the past, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like, and then if I've reviewed beers from that area, they should pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this beer in the Swedish playlist along with many others, and there are playlists there from many different countries that you can also check out. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit once again about Omnipollo. So, Omnipollo are one of the best known names when it comes to Swedish craft beer. These guys were founded back in 2011 by Henrik Fenty, who was a long-time home brewer, and Carl Grandin, who is a clothing designer. But the two had been friends for a long time. They often used to talk about beer, and one day they decided to start a brewery together, having discussed quite extensively how insular the craft beer was both in Sweden and further afield. But they felt that they wanted to really reinvigorate the craft beer scene from a stylistic and from a gastronomic sense, and they felt that this partnership between a home brewer and a designer was thus very logical. And you can't deny that Omnipollo have developed a very unique style of brewing and also quite a unique art style as well. But the name Omnipollo is derived from omnipotent chicken, so Omnipollo, pollo being Spanish for chicken. And these guys were gypsy brewers until 2020. A lot of their beers were brewed at the De Proefbrouwerij in Lochristenhifte, just outside of Ghent in Belgium, and they still brew a number of things there to this day. But they opened up the Omnipollo's Hat bar in Stockholm as well as a collaboration with Pizza Hut, and this has become very popular in the city. They've got quite a number of exclusive beers there along with some very good pizza, so I'm hoping that I can get back to Stockholm at some point soon and film a few more out and about videos up there, one of which will be at Omnipollo's Hat and another one at their new brewery now. But in 2019 they opened up another bar in Hamburg in Germany and another one in Gothenburg. The one in Gothenburg has unfortunately closed now, and they also opened up a bar a little bit later than that in Tokyo in Japan. So yeah, the one in Hamburg and the one in Tokyo are both going very, very well. But in March of 2020, there was a big move for these guys because they announced that they were going to open their own brewery in Sundbyberg to the northwest of Stockholm in a former church. And this facility had previously been home to Sundbyberg Köksbryggeri. But when they moved in, the brewing capacity started off at around 100,000 litres of beer per year, but they've been working and they've managed to scale this up. So they now have the capacity to brew over 600,000 litres of beer per year. But like I said to you, over the years, these guys have become famous for a few different things. They were one of the pioneers when it came to what are now known as pastry sours. They were doing a lot of imperial stouts with, or pastry stouts I should say. They've been doing a lot of stout beers with different flavour essences and stuff like this. Of course, the Noah Pecan Mud Pie Imperial Stout is a kind of icon of the Swedish craft beer scene. They've also been doing some really nice kind of old school IPAs. The Nebuchadnezzar West Coast IPA is one of my favourites from this brewery. Fata Morgana, they put oats in an IPA, and this was before New England IPA was really a thing. And these days they've been diversifying quite a lot and doing a number of different lagers and stuff like this. The Bianca series is one of my personal favourites as well. The Lassie Goza series. Omnipollo, of course, like I said, have developed a very, very unique style of brewing and put a lot of flavours into beer that no one would ever really think to do before. So that's something that you really do have to credit them with. And yeah, there was a bit of a debate about the purism of that, putting flavour essences into beers and things, but they have proved quite a few times that they can do the old school Reinheitsgebot style brewing. So yeah, just try some beers from these guys and see what you think. But yeah, the Noah, the Nebuchadnezzar and the Fata Morgana and anything from the Bianca series, try those four and you'll get a good idea of what Omnipollo is all about. But as of March 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 365 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and there will no doubt be more in the very near future. But yeah, that's everything I think we really need to say about Omnipollo for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's actually tell you a little bit about the beer itself. So as we mentioned earlier, this one is a 12.5% Imperial Stout. It was aged for 3 years in Willett Family Estate bourbon barrels. So this is quite an unusual beer in the fact that it's been aged for so long, and then after they brought it out of the barrels, they conditioned it for a little while with coffee beans. But this beer was actually brewed at Cerveceria Independiente, if I've pronounced that correctly, in Spain, which seems like it's another sort of De Proefbrouwerij type facility down there. I couldn't find out exactly where it was based, but yeah, it seems like it's another kind of De Proefbrouwerij type idea, you know, where breweries can rent the space, brew their beers and just kind of let it sit. So yeah, quite interesting. But that is, as I say, everything about the beer. I love Imperial coffee stouts. We've only had 2 or 3 from Omnipollo in the past, so this should be quite interesting. I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up there. So there you can see Samantha. So yeah, quite an unusual bit of artwork on this one as well. Just a plain black bottle cap on this one. And I don't think I've ever had an Imperial, any kind of beer from Omnipollo in this particular kind of bottle actually. They used to back in the day brew a number of their Imperial stouts at Dugges Bryggeri in Landvetter just outside of Gothenburg, and that was one of the reasons why Dugges Bryggeri got very good at Imperial stouts as well. So yeah, quite unusual. My first Spanish produced Omnipollo beer. So yeah, as we said, 12.5% ABV. This one, a bourbon barrel aged Imperial stout with coffee added to it. This beer cost me 100 Swedish kroner, so that is 10 euros, somewhere in the 10 euros, somewhere in the region of about £9 sterling, about $11 American. So yeah, not too bad of course. But this was bought in Sweden, Systembolaget, where it is largely non-profit or very little profit, to be honest. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. And I got a little whiff of the aroma there before we opened it up, so this should be good. Just look at the pour on that. That's insane. It's like chocolate sauce, to be honest with you. Yeah, there was big sludgy things coming out of that, so I really do wonder about this one. We might get a nice little bit of kind of lumpy malt in this. You could just see there's a lot of kind of gooey sedimentation and stuff in the bottom of this. I'm not sure how well you guys are going to be able to see that if I put the camera up. Put it up to the camera there, you can see kind of inside the bottle a little bit. Just look at that. This is how good this camera is. There you can see. So yeah, this should be pretty interesting. But yeah, you can see when this beer poured, it was, yeah, basically like chocolate sauce or something like that. But when it poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say very, very dark tan head. That has, of course, faded away to be a very, very thin foamy layer. There's just a little bit kind of a wispy island in the middle of this beer on the top, which looks pretty cool. But round the edge of the glass, there's a very slight ring to this one. It does look pretty damn nice, actually. So, yeah, pretty interesting. But you can see this beer is pretty much black as night. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts, you're not often able to you're not often able to change the colour of them just with adjuncts, to be honest with you. I've only seen it done once, and that was with beets. I think that was a Puhasta or Pujala beer, if I remember correctly, from Estonia. But yeah, if you shine the light through this one, it doesn't even give you a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max coloured edge. This beer is absolutely black as night. So yeah, you know, in terms of appearance from an Imperial Stout, nothing particularly surprising about this one, but this beer is one of the thickest pours I've ever seen, I have to say. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, this beer looks pretty much as you would expect from any kind of Imperial Stout. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma on this one then and see what it's all about. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, absolutely beautiful smelling beer. In my opinion, the barrel isn't overly obvious in this one. I don't find this beer is overly obvious when it comes to the fact that it's barrel aged. I think it's actually just it's really interesting, this one. You know, we've had some very, very good Imperial coffee stouts on the channel in recent times, particularly from Brazil. But this beer, for me, I've got the feeling it's going to be double mash at least, because you can just smell the thickness out of this one. But it's got a lovely little, you know, the barrel aging just gives it a wee bit more depth. It's got the coffee bean depth to it as well, lovely big sweet maltiness, a little bit of fruitiness. I think everything goes together in this really quite nicely, to be honest with you. But yeah, this one contains wheat and oats, which I was suspecting it would just from having smelt the thing. So yeah, this should be cool. But as I've mentioned to you before on the channel, one of my favorite, you know, probably my favorite adjuncts to put into Imperial Stouts is coffee beans, because they are as diverse as hops. You know, you've got different soil profiles across the world, you've got different water profiles. This can all affect the flavour of the coffee. And coffee beans, from what I understand, are very sensitive to what is known as the maso, the meters above sea level. So apparently, the higher the altitude at which you grow the coffee, the more likely you are to get some of these different fruity flavours and things like this. But you know, you can get citrus character, aromaticity, all of these kind of things, different kinds of fruits. And then of course there's all the variables that come into play when you're actually treating the coffee. How much do you roast it? How, you know, what temperature do you roast it at, and all these kind of things. So coffee beans are a really, really interesting adjunct to play with when it comes to Imperial Stouts. And of course you've got very good Colombian coffee, Brazilian coffee, Indonesian, you name it. There's some, and Ethiopian coffee as well is another big one. So yeah, there's some very, very big coffee producing nations out there these days. And yeah, it's just a beautiful adjunct to play with. But my impression of this beer from the aroma is this is going to be a very thick, big, creamy sort of thing, and you saw that on the pour too. But let's break the aroma down and just describe this a wee bit more in depth. So, for me, the backbone of the beer, you can absolutely get some of that lovely kind of smooth American oak out of the beer. And for me, American oak has always been a little bit smoother and slightly sweeter in its aroma and flavour, if you like, than European oak, which is naturally a little bit drier. So yeah, you can smell that smooth American oak in there. There's a little touch of vanilla and the sweet bourbon sugars, and then on top of that, you've got a big, you've got a nice big sort of cakey quality to it as well. Yeah. Yeah, so you've got that lovely big kind of cakey aroma out of this one, which is nice. And you always get this from Omnipollo. It's like a sort of Swedish kladdkaka chocolate cake type thing, which is like a really very thick brownie almost. It's really like that, but it's maybe not quite as cakey as a brownie as it has got a little bit more of a kind of liquid, highly viscous type thing to it. So there is a good bit of Swedish kladdkaka in here. On top of that, I do get an element of chocolate out of this one. There's a sweet sort of milky chocolate. Yeah, there's a sweet kind of milky chocolate to this one as well, which is going to be helped by the oats in the beer. But you've also got a slightly darker chocolate to this beer as well, like a kind of 60% cocoa. But there's also some kind of there's also a little bit of a kind of cocoa nibby dryness to this one, which is great. And I get the feeling from this beer that oats are obviously going to go some way to thickening it out, but I've got a feeling this one could well be a double mash, at least Imperial Stout. When it comes to the sweeter side of things, though, there's definitely a good little bit of brown sugar in this one. It's not too leathery. And you know, there's two things you can do with an Imperial Stout. You can do a double or triple mash, or you can do, for example, like a longer wort boil. It depends on what brewery and things. But if you have got a really long wort boil, you're going to get quite a bit of leatheriness to the brown sugars. Whereas for me, this beer, it does have a little bit of that leatheriness, but there's a lot of kind of sweet kind of treacle molasses sort of notes to this beer. So yeah, you know, the treacle molasses quality to this one, very, very sweet. You have got a little bit of that sweeter caramel in there, and also a little bit of a kind of more toasty caramel too, which I think is really nice. So yeah, the way this beer goes together on that side of things is very nice too. The malty side of this beer is absolutely lovely. The coffee beans we haven't really covered yet. The coffee beans for me are quite subtle in this one, so I'm curious to see how strong they're going to be when it comes to the actual flavour of the beer. But for me, this coffee is quite a light roast. There's a little bit of earthiness to it, so yeah, light roast, little bit of earthiness. It's got a lovely little bit of yeah, as I say, it's got a little bit of a kind of, I say it's got a little bit of aromaticity to it and a little bit of red fruit, but not too much. It's actually a very well-rounded coffee bean, this one. They didn't state what kind of coffee bean they've actually used in this one. Yeah, it would be interesting to know that again for me. I don't even drink coffee, but like I say, I find coffee beans a fascinating adjunct to use in beers. But for me, yeah, lightly earthy, a little bit of light roast, wee bit of floral aromaticity, some red kind of black curranty type fruits out of the coffee bean. And yeah, that kind of sits there at the back of the nose too. On the hoppy side of things, this beer, I'd actually be very curious to know whether it contain a little bit of hops. But yeah, this one. Oh, it says that incidentally, it says Cerveza Villa Independiente is in Cordoba. Should have mentioned that earlier here. But yeah, it says this one. It doesn't mention anything about hops in this beer, so that's kind of interesting. I wonder if they maybe haven't used hops in this one. And of course, the thing to remember when it's bourbon barrel aged or barrel aged of any description, a lot of the hoppy character will drop out of the beer over time. And if this has been barrel aged for 3 years, you're not going to get a lot. But at the same time, I still do get little elements. There's a little teeny bit of earthiness in there. There's a little bit of floral character and a wee bit of grassiness. You know, you have got the remnants of a green component in there, and then you've got all the fruitiness out of the beer. So for me, when you take in the aroma of this beer, for me it's quite smooth and black curranty. There's maybe a little bit of figgy character to it, but this is one of these aromas where I think we're going to get, you know, I think where it doesn't have a lot of fruitiness to it, but you're going to get more fruitiness out of it when you're going to get more fruitiness out of it when you actually taste the beer. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. I think we're going to get a lot more fruitiness out of this when we actually taste this. So let's get on with that. So yeah, beautiful aroma. This one has got my brain going. Let's actually take some time and taste this beer. So yeah, this one is the Samantha, a 3-year bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout with coffee beans added into it from Omnipollo in Stockholm in Sweden, brewed at Cerveceria Independiente in Cordoba in the south of Spain. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. This beer, once again, it's quite... This is definitely not one of your big typical sweet Imperial Stouts that you're going to get from Omnipollo. Like, it's not like the Yellow Belly or the Noah or any of the other big sweet ones that we've had over the years. This is a proper kind of more old school Imperial Stout, this one. And I like it. I have to say I do like this one, but you know, there's a lot of sedimentation in this one. When you take the beer in, you can feel it's got the same kind of texture to it as like a pulpy orange juice in some ways. So yeah, that's definitely interesting for sure. I've never had a beer that's had quite so much sedimentation in it, this one, to be honest with you. And the thing is, if memory serves me correctly, this isn't even the strongest one we've had from Omnipollo either. Yeah, I like it though. It's a thumbs up from me. First impression of it is just big, thick, oily, chocolate saucy type thing. But it's not, you know, this is one of the things, it's not one of the more punchy Omnipollo beers that we've had either. It's actually very smooth, and like I say, it's kind of one of the more conventional beers that we've had from these guys as well. It's a bit more natural than some of their other ones, I think we could say. But I like it. As I say, I enjoy this sub style, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, let's kind of put this together then and describe the flavour a wee bit more in depth for you. So, yeah, middle third of your palate in this beer. We'll start from the base as we always do. Backbone of the beer, you can taste that lovely, the backbone of the beer is that lovely smooth American oak. You can feel that there. Toward the front of toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there's a little bit more of a kind of oily, there's a wee bit more of a kind of oily vanilla coming out of it too. So you get the lovely smooth American oak and the more oily vanilla going further forward. So yeah, above that though, the vanilla actually takes a bit of a back seat the further into the aftertaste you go. This beer really does show more of it. The coffee is quite a bit more pungent in the flavour than you would have expected from the aroma, that's for sure. But above the woody layer, you have got a good little bit of the bourbon brown sugar, and that is actually quite a bright bourbon. As I've always said to you on the channel, for me, American bourbon is a little bit sweeter and brighter than American bourbon is a good little bit sweeter and brighter than Scotch whiskey. Scotch whiskey for me is a little bit more kind of drier and a little bit more kind of spicy in a sense. But yeah, the American bourbon here, you can feel even within the bourbon category, this one's a little bit brighter. It's got a little bit more kind of toasty character to it. That makes it quite interesting, I have to say. So yeah, on the above the bourbon brown sugars, you start to get the kind of cakey layer out of this beer. Like, yeah, above the bourbon brown sugar, you've got that yeah, above the bourbon brown sugar, you've got a little bit of that, you know, Kladkirke type thing. So yeah, you feel that really kind of oily, big, dense, like chocolate brownie type vibe coming out of the beer. Really is very, very thick. Above that, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of sponge cakey, rye bready type quality. So maybe a bit of rye bread and a little bit of a kind of, yeah, maybe a bit of sponge cake and a little bit of rye bread in that sense. And then above all of that, you start to get some of the chocolatey notes out of the beer. It's very, very layered, this in the middle third of the palate, and this is where you're going to find the most complexity out of the beer. So above the kind of rye bready layer, you start to get the chocolate. So at the back of that, middle third of your palate, you can feel the chocolatey character coming out of this one. It has got a wee bit of the cocoa nibby dryness, and it's maybe like a sort of 60% cocoa chocolate. And as you move further forward toward the front third of the palate, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of milky chocolate character out of this one, like a sort of 30% cocoa. So you can see the chocolate kind of brightens up the further forward that you come on the palate. And as I've always, pardon me, said, darker and more bitter flavours and drier flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward, and this beer really shows that. So yeah, you've got the chocolatey layer in there, and then above that you've got the kind of circle in the middle of your palate where all the brown sugars sit. So you can feel that the base of that brown sugary character has a little bit of leathery note to it. Then you've got a big thick treacle molasses type vibe coming out of the beer too. So yeah, nice big thick treacle molasses type vibe coming out of the beer as well. And as you reach the centre of your palate, you can feel that the brown sugars are a wee bit more sweet in a sense, but as you push out toward the edges of your palate, as you push out towards the edges of your palate above that, you can feel the beer does have a little bit of a more toasty, caramelly note to it as well. So yeah, we've covered all these layers now in the middle third of the palate. The interesting thing is I often get nuttiness out of Omnipollo beers, but not particularly in this case. But yeah, that's the middle third of the palate covered. Let's have a wee look at the back third of the palate then. The thing we haven't mentioned though is the coffee bean. So for me, the coffee bean kind of comes out in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, so you can feel there's that sort of bready build up in there, which is great. But then the coffee bean sits there. The coffee bean is actually quite similar to what I thought it would be from the aroma. So you've got a bit of kind of light earthiness in there, a light roast as well, but a good little bit of dryness. You've also got some nice kind of floral qualities to it as well. It has got a little bit of that light kind of floral aromaticity, and then there's a bit of a, it's actually, the fruity side of this beer is quite, the fruity side of the coffee bean is quite red fruity, but it's a bit more kind of plummy and things than I thought it was going to be from the aroma, I have to say. So yeah, good little bit of plummy character, good little bit of blackcurrant on the coffee bean side of things, and yeah, that sits in the middle, between the middle and back third of your palate in this one. So yeah, it goes together really well. But yeah, the coffee bean in this beer is quite nice, and you get more of it. You get more of the aromaticity and the fruitiness out of the coffee bean the further into the aftertaste you go. But yeah, the back third, pardon me, the back third of your palate then in this beer, again you get the kind of American oak in there. It's a little bit drier. You get the bourbon sugars above that. Again, it's a wee bit more toasty and dry. As I've always said, drier and more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate. Then above the bourbon brown sugars, you get that denser kind of Kladkirke type thing. But on the back third of the palate, it actually feels a little bit more like a kind of American chocolate brownie in a sense. And that layer is a little bit lighter and more kind of tall and airy. Then you've got the kind of chocolate sponge above that, and then you've got the chocolate sponge above that, and then you've got a more kind of rye bready, wholemeal kind of bready character there. But then the coffee bean dryness sits on top of that. The coffee bean dryness just sits on top of that as well. And yeah, further back on the palate, you're getting a wee bit more of the earthy and aromatic qualities out of the coffee too. Above everything else on that back third of the palate, there's a wee bit of the more yeasty character to this one, and it's like quite a heavy farmhousey rye bready note as well. So yeah, the way this beer goes together actually is really nice in that sense. The malty and yeasty side of this beer and the adjuncts, I guess, and the barrel, I guess we have to group all of these things together. The way that goes together is really interesting. But yeah, back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. As you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it condenses down and squashes together. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the kind of hoppy side of things then. So as I said earlier, most of the hops will have dropped out of this beer because it's been barrel aged for 3 years. But yeah, back corners of the palate, teeny little bit of earthiness, really not a lot, but the sides of your palate in this beer are quite smooth. On the front corners of the palate, there's a tiny little bit of floral aromaticity and a wee bit of grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. But as I say, that it could well be placebo effect. It really could. It could well be me thinking it's there, but it's not. So yeah, it's very smooth on the side of the palate, this beer, I have to say. So maybe they didn't add hops into this one. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, it has a real smoothness around the edge of the palate and just a little bit of grassiness on the front curve of the tongue. But let's look at that front third of the palate and see what that's all about. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready, kind of cakey build up in this one. Yeah, so you've got, nice bit of bready, cakey build up in there. It's kind of chocolate brownie-ish, but not too much. The base of that front third of your palate, there's the wood in there. There's a nice little bit of the bourbon sugar as well, then a wee bit of the kind of smooth, kind of Cladcoca type thing. Then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that. So yeah, when you take the beer in, and I think there must be a bit of sediment at the bottom of this glass because you can really feel some of these flavours intensifying a little bit. When you take the beer in, you do get a good little bit of kind of plummy, juicy character out of it. So yeah, lots of kind of plummy character out of this one. Then you have, lots of big kind of plummy character out of this one. Then you've got, how do we say, lots of plummy character. Underneath that, I get quite a little bit of a kind of sultana type note. Like it has got a wee bit of phenol to it, this one, a bit of a cough syrupy medicinal type thing. But for me, it's more like a kind of big oily sultana type note. So yeah, plums, sultanas. Then as you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you get a little more kind of figgy character out of this one. And then the base of that front half of the front third of your palate is blackcurrant, and then you get the big oily blackberry character sitting on top of that. Yeah, and I think you get more of the sultana out of this one. The further into the flavour that you go. So yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think, is it's really nice. The fruity, oily character that this beer has really matches in with all the other things. And like I say, this is a wee bit of a more conventional Omnipollo beer compared to a number of other ones we've had. But yeah, it's thick as fuck, to be quite honest with you. And you know, I think at this point it's probably good to move on to the mouthfeel of the beer. So for me, definitely full bodied. Virtually no carbonation in this one. The beer is really thick and oily, kind of sludgy almost, I think that's fair to say. In terms of IBUs, it's quite hard to place in this one because you will obviously get a bit of bitterness from the coffee. There are some hoppy remnants in there, but there's a bit of dryness to this beer too. So it really is quite hard to say what the IBU in this one is. It's probably at least 50, but yeah, otherwise it's quite it's kind of quite interesting. So yeah, there's a mixture of dryness and bitterness in there, maybe about 50-ish IBUs. On the malty side of things, like we said, this beer it's got a bit of dryness and sweetness from the barrel. There's the malty side of the beer is very thick and kind of in some ways it's actually quite creamy and sludgy. But yeah, you've got a bit of toastiness and a bit of sweetness in the malt base as well. Lovely big oily fruity character. The coffee gives you a little bit of bitterness and dryness. Yeah, it's just a really interesting beer, this one, but I've certainly enjoyed trying this, and it shows you once again that Omnipollo are very capable when it comes to doing more conventional beers, if you like. But yeah, I think they need to just have a wee look at the amount of sedimentation and stuff that's happened in this one. I'm not sure if that could be due to the difference in climate and transport and stuff like that. But yeah, there has been a little bit of something has gone awry with the amount of sediment and stuff that this beer has. But that doesn't take away from the actual flavour of the beer, I have to say. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This one was the Samantha, a 3-year bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout with coffee added to the brew, coming in at 12.5% ABV from Omnipollo in Sundbyberg in Stockholm here in Sweden, but brewed down in Spain in Cordoba at Cerveceria Independiente, if I pronounce that correctly. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Omnipollo, and let me know your own experiences with Imperial coffee stouts in Spain, and yeah, with Omnipollo as well, because I've only tried a couple of them, but I think they are very, very nice. But until the next time, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.